The Liberals, meanwhile, say that they will endeavor to do what previous governments have tried and failed to accomplish, create a national child care program. That was one of the big promises made in this week's speech from the throne. What should that program look like? Armine Yalnizyan is an economist and fellow with the Atkinson Foundation. She's with us in Ottawa. And Pierre Fortin is an economist and professor at University of Quebec in Montreal. Hello to both of you. Great to see you. Thank you very much for making time.
Hi, Vashi.
Armine, I'll start with you. Tell me a bit about, what I wanted to get some perspective on, and I think our audience would benefit, first of all, is to lay out, before we get into what the Liberals might promise, what you would describe the need for childcare like in this province, or in this country, rather. Why is it so important that a government move forward on this?
Well, actually, the pandemic has unleashed chaos in the marketplace. It's the world's first ever recession. It's the first time more women have lost jobs than men. And the major choke point in getting back is safe reopening of schools and childcare. Now, schools are publicly funded and delivered. They're not going to shutter. But what's happening because of the load that the pandemic has unleashed on market providers and operators is higher costs and lower volumes of business. And that's enough to crater any market. And that's happening in childcare, except childcare is a vital social infrastructure. You know, the Minister of Education in Ontario is saying 40% of daycare centers are not reopening. And if I was to tell you that the Minister of Transportation was saying 40% of roads and bridges aren't reopening. Do your best to keep your jobs and make sure your supply chains and your shipments are working. There would be a plan. So we're like twiddling our thumbs here as childcare services crater, which creates the block. So that's what made childcare just like something that they couldn't duck talking about. Whether the throne speech is actually the solution to the problem of potentially the recovery stalling out and even reversing course, I don't know. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Yes. Okay. That's what I want to get your perspective on. Pierre's Skype, I think, is not working properly. We're having some issues with connectivity. So I'll just ask you another question, if you don't mind. Armine, what the throne speech has promised is a significant investment in childcare to allow for more affordable spaces. I had the minister, Ahmed Hussein, on right after that announcement. And I really wanted to try and pin down what that meant, because there have been promises of this for decades by previous governments that were never fulfilled. And saying you want more affordable spaces is not the same thing as saying you will enact universal childcare, for example, or subsidized childcare right across the country. From your perspective, what is the model they should pursue? What should they be aiming for?
They're doing two things, which is really very striking and both causes cynicism as well as celebration. The language they used in the throne speech, Vashi, was early learning and childcare. And that speaks volumes about not just affordable spaces, but the quality of care children get in those spaces. We need to build a system, not simply expand the status quo, which is riddled with market failure and certainly riddled with failures to help children achieve their maximum learning potential. If that is our goal, and it should be, for two reasons, not only do we need mommies to get back to work, sure, we need that, and we need more spaces to do that. But on the other side of COVID, we are looking at decades of economic impacts flowing from population aging. We are going to need all hands on deck. And right now, the level of child poverty ranges between 10% and 30%, depending on the community that you're looking at. So we need to make sure every child is learning ready when they enter school and learning supported as they go through school. That means qualified early learning educators. That means paying them so that they don't abandon the field. And that means more than just more spaces that are affordable, which is don't get me wrong, we absolutely need more spaces. We've got about 27% of our kids in regulated childcare compared to an OECD average of 70%. And that was before the pandemic, before we started losing capacity. So we know we can do better.
And so what are the implications, I guess, for the policy that the government pursues? Like, what should it look like? They said they would, in the throne speech, written right in, they said they would look to the model of Quebec. When I asked the minister, he didn't exactly say, yeah, we want to expand that nationwide. He said we'd look to that model and others within kind of the confines of the OECD. But I still don't have like a kind of clear picture of what that might mean? Does it mean, for example, the federal government subsidizes daycare spots for everyone, or is there something? I'm sure you have a much more thorough idea of what it might look like. I don't know.
No,
what
I
it
do
should.
not.
I say what it should.
All I know is that we all agree Quebec is the undisputed leader in the country in assuring access to affordable care. But where it has dropped the ball entirely is quality. We know that from study after study. In fact, I just put out something with a couple of colleagues on the Atkinson Center website about how we invest in early learning and childcare, and it shows that we're just massively underinvesting in the actual care. We should be learning from what happened in long-term care facilities. Right. Yes, you've got spaces, but the quality of care sucks. So this is not just warehousing people so other people can go to work. This has to be about preparing for the future. People are condemning governments for squandering the last 6 months, not having a safe and well-communicated plan to reopen schools. They dropped the ball, and they're standing by while childcare services are cratering. But I got to tell you, this isn't just about the pandemic. We are looking at this slow-moving train called population aging coming down the track at us, and we're doing zero to make sure that we've got all hands on deck, that everybody's ready. And the biggest thing we could be doing right now is training more early learning educators so that they're qualified and making sure that they are compensated and supported with resources in a way that makes them not flee the field. You can't provide excellent early learning, which is what every child should have the right to, without investing in the workforce. It's that simple. And so we don't know what the model is that the federal government is going to undertake, but we do know that the language is there, that it isn't just about childcare, which could be warehousing, but it is about early learning and childcare. And goodness knows we've got a quarter of a century or more of research that shows us it literally pays for itself.
And do you think just because of the sheer volume of that research, the case that has been laid out, the jurisdictional issues that seem to really stand in the way of a lot of stuff, or depending on the way you're looking at it, I shouldn't say it that way, but certainly make things take longer than they might if just one government were able to unilaterally do something, will be an issue when it comes to childcare, because obviously much of it is under the jurisdiction of provinces. Do you think it's, I guess, what is the best path forward? Like, does the federal government need to take a leadership role here, and do they need to put their money, I guess, where that role is concerned?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's easier than you think. It's way easier than you think. In 2017, all provinces signed on to bilateral agreements with the federal government. They've already negotiated successfully together. That's the platform on which to build. And the platform on which the federal government should be saying to cash-strapped provinces, all of which have got both quantity and quality challenges in childcare. Here's a 100-cent dollar. I'm not asking you to cost share it. I'm going to give you the money if you follow the things that we will negotiate on the ways you're going to improve access to care, that you're going to close gaps in access to quality care, that you're going to train people and make sure you have enough qualified staff to provide the care, and that you're going to expand access to services and improve outcomes for young kids. Like, these are, what province doesn't want to get free money to be able to say to their citizens, look at how we're improving care for you, right? Like, it just seems to me like a no-brainer. This isn't a jurisdictional argument. This is about how they get free money to do something they should be doing already.
It seems like it. I guess the caveat is, does it end up being free money? And B, like, if you look at long-term care, for example, the feds came out this week saying, we want to give you some more money, but we're going to impose national standards. And Quebec was already like, everybody was getting their backs up, but I think there's a lot more politics at play with that. So I take your point that this is a bit different.
Okay, let them say, not in my backyard, don't give me money. And then let them turn around and say to their voters, we turned down the money to improve the quality and quantity of care because it was in our jurisdiction and we weren't doing anything about it. That'll be an easy sell.
I know. I have one last thing to put to you, and I've always wanted to ask you about something like this, because, there are politics at play, in all of this stuff, whether it gets done or not. I had a conversation before remember how the NDP had promised universal childcare in 2015? It was popular at the time. It didn't end up,
The NDP promised?
The NDP promised, yeah, universal childcare, sort of modeled on the Quebec system, not exactly, but way back in the 2015 election. Anyway.
In the election. Okay.
Yes, in the campaign. So I remember talking to some various strategists in the last campaign and saying, hey, how come you're not proposing this again? Because I remember interviewing parents at the time, and it was very, it really resonated with them. And they said to me what they ended up finding through their own surveying was there's a very small segment of the population to which, for 4 years or 5 years of their life, this is the most important thing in the world. And then beyond that, it just isn't. And in fact, it creates resentment, they said, and this is from a political point of view, with older Canadians who say, well, I had to, muster my way through it, and I did it. And so they ended up dropping it as a central campaign plank. And I just wondered what you would say to strategists who still believe that today, if you were trying to convince them to do otherwise.
Look, I get it. I mean, anybody that's been through childbirth understands you never want to go back there again. And I went through exactly the struggle that people are talking about. And I am incensed that 25 years later, we are still talking about families having to struggle. Look, the norm right now in the labor market is that women are half the employees. They were at least before the pandemic. And we are looking at macroeconomic decline if we don't make sure that childcare is in place. It's the choke point to recovery. You've heard me say it before. Mm-hmm. No recovery without she-covery, no she-covery with childcare. That's just the math of the situation we are in. There are simply not enough men to make up the difference in the amount of income that is going to be lost by mommies staying at home, who make up 40% of incomes in households with kids. We cannot afford to stand by and watch the economy drag because we think this is a market choice. And look, the market's failing. Oh, that's too bad. It's just another industry that's failing. But again, this is critical social infrastructure. And as we move forward into an era of population aging, we can't afford not to support young families. The same old people that are saying, well, I got through it, why don't you just struggle for a few years too, are going to expect when they retire great quality services. And who's going to pay for those great quality services? A shrinking cohort of working people who are going to be told also, oh, no, you can't have wage increases because I'm on a fixed income. So no inflation for you, no new wages for you. We've got to support the working age population. You can't ask them to do everything, including all the heavy lifting for decades to come. This is a 21st century legacy social and economic program. Just like healthcare was in the 20th century, this is what workers and the future of workers is going to need if we're not going to watch our standard of living decline. That's my argument.
Well, I'm glad I asked. Thank you, Armine. Great to see you. A pleasure to have you back on the show, as always.
Thank you, Vashi.
Armine Yalnizyan is an economist and fellow with the Atkinson Foundation. She joined us, I should say, here in Ottawa. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.